Between 2010 and 2015, inspection teams from TSB, AWF and Eyes on Animals spent 93 days on the Turkish side of the EU-Turkey border in a place called Kapikule. They saw over 480 livestock trucks there and thoroughly inspected 352 of them, of which 247 were in violation of the EU Animal Transport Regulation 1/2005. This corresponds to 70% of all livestock trucks from 13 exporting EU member states. Behind these statistics are tens of thousands of animals whose individual misery and unthinkable suffering are the focus of our investigations. The Treaty of Lisbon and the EU Animal Transport Regulation are supposed to protect the welfare of animals up to the place of destination, but the reality is different. Under the guise of EU laws, livestock exports to third countries become transports of torture. The transport industry ignores the animal welfare requirements, the member states do not apply them, and the Commission, as guardian of the treaties, does not sanction them. In the sovereign territory of the third country, the Commission has no rights there to interfere. The external area of the EU border with Turkey is located in Kapikule and becomes a bottleneck for thousands of livestock trucks, which can get stuck here for hours, days and weeks. In the so-called no man's land between the Bulgarian and Turkish border, or on border side roads and parking lots in Kapikule, animal trucks are waiting. One hears the cattle bellowing. The suffering of the sheep is silent. There is no infrastructure here to care for live animals. They stay on board the trucks until the formalities at the border are finished. Our investigators look into the trucks. They check on 352 in total, inspect the conditions of the animals and document their suffering. We have been sending our reports to the responsible authorities since 2010. Barely anything has changed since then. This film illustrates the failures of the parties responsible: the livestock export industry, the member states and the EU Commission. A Hungarian truck with calves on board has been parked here for hours under the blazing sun, loaded on 3 levels. The calves are crying out and licking the metal bars, a clear sign of thirst. The tank is empty, the calves unfamiliar with drinking nipples. A little further away is a Dutch transporter. Leslie Moffat looks into the trailer. A dead calf is found in the filthy bedding. Iris Baumgartner describes the conditions on a Polish truck loaded with bulls. The animals have already been waiting on board the truck for 7 days at the border.
The animals are totally exhausted. They received water 2 days ago. They are thirsty. The drivers have only 1 water bucket, and we had to organize water for them because the company cannot cope with the situation. We also organized food now for the animals because they are out of food and they cannot manage to organize food, obviously. And so the animals are very
Often the truck drivers are overwhelmed by the situation at the border. Our team tries to help the animals and get the drivers' cooperation. Some drivers refuse, some are thankful. The deep, long moan of this bull is an emergency sound we hear repeatedly during our inspection. Useless action is taken by some drivers to cope with the increasingly dangerous environment for the animals on board. As there are no water devices on this cattle truck, a driver just sprays water into the trailer and as a result makes the conditions inside even worse. The cattle, in their desperation, try to lick from the filthy bedding. Like in almost all the other livestock trucks we check on, the bedding is extremely filthy and stinks from the buildup of manure and ammonia. It irritates the eyes and the mucous membranes. Desperate for water, these animals lick the few water drops they can get off the metal bars, too little to survive. Weak animals give up and lay down, like this one bovine, whose moaning expresses pain and agony. Some sheep from Greece have been stuck for 5 days at customs. They are completely exhausted and suffer silently, tightly packed in a horribly smelling truck. They keep themselves on their feet with their last ounce of strength, using their head as a support. Underneath them lie others which have not survived the journey to the border and the long waiting time. Weak lambs have no chance to move to safety. In the overcrowded trailer, they are trampled to death by their transport mates. A lying sheep tries to get up. Helplessly, he tries not to stand on his transport mates, without success. They are standing in filth, they are lying in filth, they are dying in filth. Inappropriate transport vehicles become deadly. One sheep slips into a gap, he cannot free himself and has to endure this torture for days. His death sentence. Another sheep got his hind leg stuck between the floor and the outer wall. Joining forces and by the help of a crowbar, we managed to free the leg, but the injury is severe. What about all the sheep that do not get help? Insufficient headspace in violation of the EU regulation is still observed frequently. The animals cannot stand upright during the whole journey. In addition, the air circulation is limited. Sharp edges in the trailer cause injuries. The EU regulation calls for trained personnel and adequate rest and feeding periods for the animals. The practices at the Turkish customs are in clear violation of this. Despite repeatedly informing the appropriate authorities of this concern, no action has been taken. After customs controls, sick and injured animals are reloaded. All animals must continue on their journey so that the figures on the documents remain consistent. In order to document the entire journey, our teams also trail livestock trucks from the border to the place of destination. We follow 2 Dutch livestock trucks with Hungarian bulls on board, jam-packed and lying in filthy bedding. They are in distress. Extreme thirst and hunger cause the bulls to eat their own excrement. It does not take long until more animals collapse and remain lying. Animals which are not able to get back on their feet are likely to die. The weight of their own body presses on their internal organs. The stench in the trailer is nauseating. For the animals, there is no possibility to escape this horrible environment.
So the condition inside the truck is really bad now. It's dirty and the ammonia smell is very high and the animals are totally exhausted.
In a truck, an exhausted bull is lying on the floor. Our team calls him Big Boy. This mighty animal remains lying and does not even react when workers painfully twist his tail. The bull only shows signs of life when an employee approaches with a bottle of water. The workers laugh at his desperation, but their laughter reveals a portion of shame in the face of this mighty animal who lies helpless on the ground and greedily drinks the water like a baby. Sometimes drivers succeed in getting an animal on his feet. This is done by using an electric prod, which is prohibited. Sick animals are not spared. They must stay on the truck until the destination is reached. At the border there is only one water hose available. There is no shade, no feed and no stable to unload the animals. The calves on this Romanian truck remain without water and feed. The livestock trucks are supposed to have automatic drinking systems. Nevertheless, the water tank is not always full. The greatest problem, however, is that the water troughs or drinking nipples are often inappropriate for the types of animal on board and only accessible to the animals standing close by. Also, the inner construction of the livestock trucks causes injuries. The loading ramp from an upper deck is too steep and has no lateral protection. The surviving sheep can only be unloaded when their dead transport mates are out of the way. This is routine for the workers. First aid for the animals is sadly not routine, only when our teams are present. The scenes repeat themselves, day after day, year after year. In 2014 we filmed the exact same problems as we did in the years before. Like this cattle truck, where an adult bovine tries in vain to drink from a system designed for pigs. Sometimes we meet drivers that did bring along additional water buckets, but only a few, which are not sufficient to give water to all the animals. The animals desperately fight to reach the water. This leads to additional stress. The animals which are already weaker have no chance. And also in 2015 we observed the same violations as in the years before. The trucks are filthy, the stench irritates the eyes and mucous membranes, the animals are standing deep in feces, wet from leaking water. On board one truck, a thirsty bovine tries to suckle from the udder of another animal. The heifers, however, are not in lactation, but out of desperation the bovine still tries, remembering how she used to find liquid when still young. Dividers that are not solid down to the floor pose a serious risk to the animals. They can get stuck underneath and no longer get up. The injuries on the back of one bovine show his failed attempts. Day and night the animals are locked up in the stinking trucks. In order to ruminate they would have to lie down. They try to avoid this as their sensitive nasal mucous membranes would be irritated even more. Only weak animals lay down. Their condition then worsens. The water troughs are installed inappropriately and not protected against contamination. Also here the cattle have no fresh water to drink. Overcrowded conditions make things worse for the animals on board, especially in the summer. The inside of the trucks heats up. Animals in heat stress are panting on overcrowded trailers parked in the direct sun because no shade is provided. At the EU-Turkey border the animals are exposed to extreme temperatures in violation of the European animal transport regulations. All authorities know about the heat stress. Nothing is done. Not by the EU, not by the exporting member states, and not by the Turkish authorities. Numerous livestock trucks are waiting for clearance, in general for hours, but also days and sometimes up to 1 week if transport documents are incomplete. A failure of the exporters, the transporters, and the competent authorities of the member states. For the animals, these waiting times are life-threatening. In the no man's land of the border, nothing has changed despite our complaints. There is still only one water hose to give water to hundreds of animals which are stationed there at the same time. The parking lot is in the blazing sun. Proper care of the animals is not possible. The protection of the animals stops at the EU border. Sick, dying, injured animals and those giving birth are left to their own fate. Like this one sheep in labor and this pregnant bovine. Yet again, animals give birth on board the trucks, although the animal transport regulation clearly prescribes that animals must not be transported in the last 10% of their gestation. While the animals in the parked vehicles endure hunger, thirst and heat stress, the engines of the trucks are running in order to operate the air conditioning inside the drivers' cabins. The diesel stench mixes with the hot air. It does not matter into which livestock truck we look, animal suffering is everywhere. Sabrina Gurtner and Nathalie Pfister check the transport documents together with the truck driver. Often it can already be seen in the papers that the journey times approved by the member states are not realistically estimated. They do not correspond with the actual distances, nor the common traffic situations or waiting times at the Turkish border. With simple means we try to help, but our help is a drop in a bucket. There are so many animals, we cannot help them all. Some animals die right before our eyes. Often the dead ones remain on the trucks, as otherwise new, updated transport papers would be needed, which would further delay the consignment. We inspect animals entering Turkey at the EU-Turkey border. We trail EU livestock trucks to the final place of destination in Turkey. We stay until the very end. We report on the condition of the animals at each phase. We want to know if the EU animal transport regulations and the Treaty of Lisbon are being complied with. After 5 years of sending countless complaints and inspection reports to the responsible authorities, the only conclusion to draw is that animals exported to third countries are not protected at all. This trade is a systematic violation of Article 13 of the Treaty of Lisbon. Behind the statistics and legislative promises, there is only suffering.